The Crown Office is wholly devolved here in Scotland. That's why the situation is very different here. The Post Office could not prosecute these individuals here. It was the Crown Office. One of those who was prosecuted was Judith Smith. She pled guilty in 2009 at Selkirk Sheriff Court to a charge of fraud after thousands of pounds disappeared. Judith's lawyer told us that the Crown Office displayed a worrying lack of scepticism at the Post Office's case, particularly as there was no trace of the money anywhere. Judith was even asked if she'd blown it all on a lavish holiday or if she had a gambling problem. Her conviction was finally quashed just last week, but Judith's lawyer said the Crown Office should have launched a review of all past Post Office prosecutions the minute it became aware of the Horizon problem in 2013. They didn't, and it took a further 2 years for prosecutors to dismiss ongoing cases that relied on Horizon evidence. So can the First Minister explain why prosecutions in Scotland continued for 2 more years after the Crown Office became aware of concerns with Horizon? And does the First Minister agree with the Scottish Conservative calls that the Lord Advocate at the time, Frank Mulholland, should come to this Parliament to answer questions on this scandal?
First Minister.
First of all, can we be clear? What it took was an ITV drama in order to get the UK government to make sure that they took action, even though they were being told by hundreds of sub-postmasters and mistresses up and down the country that they had been lied to. So let's not forget that is what spurred the UK government into action, not the pleas and the desperate pleas of sub-postmasters right up and down the country. And let's go back to the point, of course, that the Lord Advocate made, I think very clearly in this chamber, that the Crown was, in her words, I believe, misled and given false reassurances by the UK Post Office, time and time and time again. And I have to say, hearing the harrowing testimonies, including, of course, the one from Judith that Douglas Ross just articulated, there are many institutions that will be answerable for what they did and the action that they took. And I would fully expect, and I'm certain it will be the case, that the Crown Office would also, of course, fully cooperate with the public inquiry underway. In terms of why the Crown chose to prosecute cases post-2013, again, the Lord Advocate laid out the fact that, of course, there was guidance to prosecutors in 2013 involving Horizon cases, and, of course, then they stopped prosecuting cases in 2015 that were sufficiently dependent on Horizon data. In terms of Lord Advocate, of course, the current Lord Advocate is responsible and answerable for the Crown. Of course, she has already answered questions about what took place in 2013, and she has already said if MSPs want a further opportunity to question her, then she will make herself available.
Douglas Ross.
Of course, my question was about one of her predecessors, and I think it is crucial that this Parliament hears from Frank Mulholland, and it would just be interesting to know if the First Minister supports those Scottish Conservative calls. Because all of this matters here in Holyrood, because the Crown Office is a devolved institution. The procedure by which these convictions can be quashed will be set by this Government and this Parliament. But the process set out by the Lord Advocate could see that taking far, far longer in Scotland than it should. Myra Philp worked with her mum Mary at the Post Office in Auchtermuchty in 2001. At 7 a.m. one morning, Post Office auditors burst through the door and demanded the keys to the shop. Mary, a former policewoman, was suspended, but she immediately suspected Horizon was to blame. The Post Office, on the other hand, blamed her teenage grandchildren. Auditors accused them of breaking in during the night, overriding the time lock and taking the money. Now, Mary wasn't prosecuted, but she lost her business. She died in 2018, the year before Alan Bates forced the Post Office to admit Horizon was desperately flawed. Myra told us this: "My mum died not knowing she was right." The Lord Advocate is head of the independent judiciary in Scotland, but she is also the chief legal adviser to the Scottish Government and the Cabinet. So does the First Minister accept that if we follow the position the Lord Advocate laid out to the Scottish Parliament of her preferred process, it will take far too long for postmasters wrongly convicted, and some could die before their names are cleared?
First Minister.
Can can I give clarity once again, not just to Douglas Ross, but to Mary's family, to all the other sub-postmasters, sub-postmistresses right across Scotland. The UK Government last week announced that they were looking to bring forward legislation in the UK Parliament in order for mass exonerations to take place when it comes to wrongful convictions. I have written to the Prime Minister to say we welcome that process. And not only that, as the First Minister, that we'd be willing to work with the UK Government for that legislation to take place and have effect on a UK-wide basis. Now, that could be through an LCM. I should say to Douglas Ross, if an LCM, for whatever reason, the UK Government, if that is not possible, we are already working on contingencies that are in separate Scottish legislation if that is required. I hope not. I think that if there is a possibility for an LCM, that would be the easiest and the quickest route. I, as the First Minister of Scotland, will decide what legislative route, of course, is brought forward to this Parliament in order to exonerate those who are wrongfully convicted. Let's say once again that harrowing testimony that Douglas Ross has given in relation to what Mary had to suffer, and no doubt the consequences are still felt by her family. That happened on the UK Government's watch. That happened because of a post office that's wholly reserved to the UK Government. And UK Government ministers of UK-based parties, time after time after time, did not believe sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses like Mary and others who were being harassed by the Post Office at the time. And they have waited far too long for justice. And let me give an absolute confirmation and assurance to them that we will work with the UK Government and whoever else we need to make sure there is not a single day longer that they have to wait, not just for justice, but for access to compensation.